It's the Evan edition. The Evan edition. The Evan edition. The Evan edition. It's the Evan edition. The Evan edition. The Evan edition. The Evan edition. It's the Evan edition.
Welcome back to the Evan edition, where we talk movies, TV, comics, pop culture, and everything in between. I am your host, Evan Bernstein, and I am joined today by a special guest. Today's guest is someone who has taken a lifelong love of movies and turned it into something much bigger, a platform for discovering, discussing, and celebrating film. His passion for movies began with the filmmakers who helped define a generation: Steven Spielberg, Tim Burton, Robert Zemeckis. And over the years, that love of big screen entertainment grew into an appreciation for everything from independent and international cinema to the movies dominating the cultural conversation today. He's a Chicago-based film critic, a member of Chicago Indie Critics, and the founder and editor-in-chief of Movie Archer, where he's helped build not only a home for film and television criticism, but an entire podcast network bringing together different voices and perspectives on the movies we love. And later tonight, we're putting that critic hat to work because Adam is sticking around as we dive into our full review of Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. But before we get there, I want to talk about the person behind the reviews, where his love of movies began, what it actually means to be a film critic, and whether watching movies for a living changes the magic of watching them at all. Adam Fried, welcome to the Evan edition, my friend.
Evan, thank you so much for having me on. When you had first invited me, I jumped out of my seat and I said, this is a show that I've been watching, that I've been listening to, so I'm very excited and humbled that I would be invited to come on and give my perspective. And I got to say, and I did say this to you, off mic before we started, I made a point of putting in my contact lenses for this because I needed people to be able to tell us apart. Two handsome, bald-headed gentlemen like us, you got to, be able to distinguish one from the other. So Evan and Adam, we're going to do the very best that we can here. We're going to talk a little bit about Movie Archer, which I'm excited to do. And I'm extremely excited to talk about The Odyssey, which I'm a little bit surprised that there have been different perspectives on this. So we'll get into all of that.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited. And yeah, good call on the glasses. We are two handsome, bald gentlemen, and we don't want anyone feeling like they hit their head and they are seeing double. That's right. There is two of us, and we're pretty much covering coast to coast. So you're welcome, America. We got you covered.
Keep bald representation alive.
Exactly.
Us and John Bernthal.
Yeah, exactly. Who's not even owning it. He was like, oh, I'm so happy to grow out my luscious locks again. And now on the circuits for Spider-Man and the Odyssey, it's just flowing locks. I'm like, own it. Help us out. Yeah. We need you.
If only you and I had that option, I'm sure we would jump on it as well.
Yeah, I think I would jump on it. I try and tell myself no. Like when I see past photos, I'm like, he as an younger me, he looks stupid with hair. He looks way better now. Trying to just justify it a little bit.
Yeah. I'll trade the hair and just stay 10 years younger. I can go with that.
Yeah. Hey, you're young at heart. And we got a bunch of people in the chat. Hello, Cece. Hello, Lucas. Thank you guys for stopping by. Let's jump right into it because I read that your love of film really started as a kid in the 80s with Spielberg, Tim Burton, and Robert Zemeckis, which is a pretty incredible lineup to grow up on. Yeah. Do you remember the movie that first made you realize there was something special happening behind the camera? That movies weren't just entertainment, but something you wanted to understand?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes, but it wasn't one single movie. It was probably 2 or 3 different moments that kind of hit me at the right time. I'm going to start this story by telling you the end. I'm a completely healthy person, but I am a lifelong asthmatic. And so growing up in the early 80s, I spent more time in the hospital than kids would now today because of the advancements in medicine. I was a kid who had pneumonia like 9 or 10 times before I was 10 years old. And because I was young, I would always get sent to the pediatric wing of the hospital. And my parents and I would sit in there. And back then, I mean, having handheld media just didn't exist. So I always looked forward to them rolling in the movie cart with the VHS. And of course, because it was a pediatric wing, what did they have? A lot of animated films. I don't know if you remember the old animated version of The Hobbit. It was like 42 minutes long. That was always fun. But the one that hooked me was Beetlejuice. It was the only live action movie that they had on the pediatric hospital cart. And so I probably watched it 2 or 3 times every time I was in, and I was in every couple of months. And so I fell in love with just how unique stylistically Tim Burton's worlds were, but also the costume and just how over the top his characters. I fell in love with Michael Keaton. And because I fell in love with Michael Keaton, of course, I fell in love with Batman, right? So that was kind of my introduction to like, I really like this because it made me feel good in a time when physically I didn't feel my best. But I think what really cemented it, and I kind of came of age as a movie lover in the early 90s. And 1993, I got to go with my parents to see Jurassic Park on opening night. And that's back in the day when you would have to wait in line. There was no pre-ticket sales. So we waited in line at the Arcada Theater in St. Charles, Illinois, which is a classic old balconied movie theater. It has made an appearance in a couple of different movies. Most recently, Fincher's Hitman. It popped up in the backdrop in there. And so I got to see Jurassic Park. And that is a movie that changed me. I was completely transported. Roger Ebert once said, any movie that takes me out of my seat is a movie worth watching more than once. And that's how I felt with Jurassic Park. Following year, it's 94, right? Arguably the best movie, at least movie year in history. And so we have Shawshank. I snuck into Pulp Fiction. You had Forrest Gump, of course. You had Lion King. And so I went from like, wow, I really like this. It's making me feel the way I want to feel as I'm figuring out the world at 12 and 13 years old. And then 1994 happened. And it was almost like, yeah, this is it. What else would I want to do? So long answer to a short question. It took a little time, but yeah, I got there as a kid.
You know, it's quite interesting, your journey, because your taste, it eventually expands, right? Like your journey into it as a kid is, you know, you're going through this in the hospital, month in, months out, going back in, watching Beetlejuice, watching, you know, big popcorn movies, and then went into more, you know, independent international cinema. Was there a film that opened the door for you, like something that made you think, you know, I want to examine movies more, that it was more than just what you were seeing, but it was more about like what makes movies in general? Was there
the
a
first
turning
time
point there?
really started feeling like I need to figure out what's going on behind the camera was when I saw the movie Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. And again, I think it was my mom and dad, and they weren't big movie lovers. They still aren't. They like movies. They just have a hard time with the patience enough to sit through the whole thing. And I got them to go with me to the theater to see Crouching Tiger. And of course, we know all of the high action scenes and all of the rope work and wire work that goes into that film. I had to go home and read everything I could in the early days of the internet to figure out how did that magic actually come to fruition. So in terms of an international film, that's kind of where it started for me. And kind of jumping into conversation about Christopher Nolan, who I know we're going to get into more. Chris Nolan's Memento was the first time that I saw a movie, and I did watch this one at home. It was like one of those days I went to Blockbuster and all of the new releases that I wanted had been checked out. Do you remember that feeling? You go there and you're like, I hope they have. And you'd have to like look behind every box. And whatever the movies were I wanted at the time in my teenage brain weren't there. And I remember I had a teacher in high school. And he wasn't a film teacher. He was a business teacher. But he's like, you guys, I watched the craziest movie at home. It was called Memento. I didn't recognize anybody who was in it. Guy Pearce wasn't a huge name then. And so I didn't get the movies I wanted. And I was like, I remember that Mr. Rogina said something about Memento. So I went and I checked it out. There was like 2 copies. Nobody wanted to rent it. And it blew my mind. And it's about 90 minutes long. I watched it twice in a row. I stayed up later than I should have. And that was one of the first small budget kind of indie feeling movies that made me realize, like, wow, there's an entire world out there of things that I haven't experienced. I didn't know you could tell stories like that. And so Chris Nolan had a big part in me falling in love with movies the way that I have. Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
How old were you when you were watching Memento?
Let me look here. So Memento came out in 2000. So I would have been 19. So I thought I was a sophisticated movie watcher in 94 at 13.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, I watched Pulp Fiction and had no idea what was going on. But as time went on and I started to explore more of these things, Memento really made me feel like this is something that is worth exploring. I usually would kind of just watch a movie and move on to the next one. And it was one I wanted to keep going back to because I felt like there were enough breadcrumbs that there was a deeper understanding, kind of like the way that you would read and reread a classic novel. And some of my favorite books, I've probably read 5, 6, 10 times. And Memento was the first movie that I remember feeling like I've got to watch it again and again, maybe once a year to really like stay connected with it. And I've come to do that with a lot of different movies. And that as I age and my life experiences evolve and mature, they mean different things to me at 45 than they did at 19. And so that's kind of my history with like growing as a movie lover.
I love that. Yeah. When, I grew up with, my stepdad's from Oakland, and it's like, he's like, regardless of rating, he's seeing the movies. So he's taking me to like Saving Private Ryan at like 9 years old. And
I just showed that to my 12-year-old a week ago.
It's pretty graphic, especially for a kid going to see that. I mean, people are getting like their arms blown off. I mean, it was fantastic, but he never really shielded me unless it was like graphic sexual things. He never really kind of shielded me. He was like, no, like he's going to go see Scream. Like he's going to go, my uncle took me to see like Blade in 1998. I was like 9. Wow. And so but I remember mine. It wasn't a movie that I would watch it whenever it was on TV, but I remember Interview with the Vampire. It
with
really
Tom Cruise?
Me. Yeah. And Brad Pitt and Christian Slater. And I remember I was super scared of vampires, but when I watched this movie, it was like, oh, wow. Like vampires are not just like a singular thing. One person can be nice. One person, like it kind of like, it was just like the character depth of that movie of vampires and living with them throughout time and seeing how they change. As a kid, it was like so fascinating to me. I was like, oh, you just got to act like a vampire and then I won't be scared of them. And I remember that specifically in my mind. Yeah.
So like being a movie nerd is a lot of fun, but there are times that it can get in the way. And you just brought up this movie. I'm going to tell you this story, dancing on the line of appropriateness. I had someone in high school that I was very interested in, and it was like one of the first times, it was in high school, like you'd get together as a group, but you really wanted to kind of like be hanging out. And whoever's house we were at way back in the 90s, they popped on Interview with a Vampire. And she was like, what a great opportunity for the two of us to have a little cuddle time. And I wasn't having it. Like as much as I liked this girl, like in the hallways of the school, and I told my friends like, yeah, I want to be there. She's going to be there. As soon as that movie came on, my movie brain completely interrupted whatever romantic aspirations I had and just totally ruined it. She told all of her friends the next day, she's like, he cared more about the movie than he ever did about me. And now, of course, I'm a teenager. I have no regrets. Lovely person. I know she has a great life, but that's a movie that like, again, it just showed me like, God, I love this so much. And maybe more than this potential, person I might've dated. So sometimes it gets in the way of, and I don't know if that's ever happened to you.
No, I mean, I totally get that, which is ironic because I was going to ask you, nowadays, now that you've had this lens for so long and this passion, really, can Adam just sit down with his family eat some popcorn and watch a movie, or is it some part of your brain always like analyzing like the script, performances, cinematography, like the pacing? Can you turn it off?
No, no, it sounds pretentious to say like it's a gift and a curse. But I think
I don't think
anybody who
so.
does anything for a living, if you and I were electricians, I think it would be impossible for us to walk through a home and not notice certain aspects of the way the home's electrical circuitry and the placement of all of the different things that you and I might just walk right past. So no, I can't do that. I do my very best not to allow that to ruin anybody else's experience. My son and I go to a lot of movies together. I feel very fortunate that he has been invited to a number of the premieres that I get to go to in Chicago. They've started coming more frequently with a +1. And, he and I have great conversations on the ride home, and he's really growing his film going analytical mind.
Wow.
And at the same time, there's a lot of crap out there, right? And there's a lot of movies that, not to disrespect anybody's art, but there's a lot of movies that are just meant to be fun, right? Think of like your streaming movies. And I know that in my heart, but I can't turn the analytical part of my brain off. And so maybe I have less fun with some of those movies than I should. I want to remind myself that it's okay to be fun. It doesn't need it to be professional all the time. And I do struggle with that. So that's definitely something I could do better with.
I totally agree. And my wife helped me a lot. You know what I mean? My wife's favorites, and I do think these are classics, but these are her like, top 5, right? But
all right, let's see if we got any overlap here.
This is for her. There's going to be no overlap with you.
No, but for my wife, yeah.
Okay, it's like, Clueless and Mean Girls and what else? She loves Forrest Gump. She actually, it was on TV the other day. We watched it. But you know what I mean? Like, I don't think I was as appreciative of rom-coms, because in the 2000s, it got very like oversaturated, right? Like pretty much after like, there's been these moments like Harry Met Sally and Pretty Woman where everyone was like, we got to do more. We got to do more, we got to do more with her and try and replicate. It's like, nah, you're stretching it out too much. And so I guess I kind of got turned off from rom-coms, right? I feel like people view it as a negative thing, but a lot of rom-coms that I've seen recently, not a lot, a couple of rom-coms I've seen recently, I have been able to kind of sit back and appreciate it for what it is. Like, this is a direct to Netflix rom-com, right? And is it cute? In this past one, it takes place in San Francisco. I love that. So I'm like, I'm trying. I do feel you, but I am trying to see it for what it is, even though I see a lot of convenient wooden dialogue, very, very funny things. But at the same time, I'm like, oh, okay, like that was cute for what it is.
I'm kind of a sucker for like the Lifetime holiday movies. Often around that time of year, we'll be like wrapping a gift or something and just have it on. And there is like a nice predictability and a comfort. A couple of winters ago at Movie Archer, I did a special segment like on that brand of movie, because now the streamers are all cranking them out. It did abysmally poorly in terms of clicks and reads. People were not interested in reading any sort of serious film criticism about those movies, which I kind of learned the hard way. But it is a nice reminder that like sometimes people just want the warm blanket. And I think you brought up a good point. Watching something with someone that you love is a reminder that although this might be a career, it's also an opportunity just to spend time with the people that you love. My son has helped me with that. My wife doesn't spend a lot of time going to these. We have another kid who's a little bit younger who can't go to everything. So she's kind of at home sometimes. But one of the times that I got an invitation and she said, I'm going even if you can't, was, The Devil Wears Prada 2. And The Devil Wears Prada 2 is a movie that I really enjoyed, but I bet you I enjoyed it a few points more because of who I was sitting next to. And because I knew it was filling her heart the way that it was. It was a movie that I had a great deal of fun with, even though, look, a lot of movies have some flaws, and this is one of them. But I just had a great time. And so that it's a nice reminder, like, let's be human about all of this. And just remember the intent of the movie is not always to make Citizen Kane.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And yeah, for that movie, I had to see the first one for the first time because I never did, so that I could go see the second one with
the first
my
one's
wife.
Pretty dang good now, Evan. I like that first one.
I did like it a lot.
Yeah.
I did like it a lot. I was like, wow, this is not that bad. Okay, what was I?
No.
What was I putting it
of
on
its
for?
time? It's become a really nice time capsule movie.
That's the best part about these kind of movies is it is a time capsule, especially, you know, those are formative years for me. Those are like my teenage years. So it's like going back to that. It feels very like familiar, and it's also kind of funny, the things that they're wearing or the things that came back in style. And yeah, it's very interesting. I wanted to ask you though, because you brought up something, you know, I'm about to be a dad. My son is going to be born at the end of October.
Oh, congratulations. A Halloween baby.
Thank you. Yeah. Yep.
Oh, that's amazing. I'm so excited
on the 31st. Yeah. Wow. So, and I'm just getting so excited to like watch movies with it. Like, I'm like, you know, fiending to like get to these moments where they're cognizant of what they're seeing, you know, and they can sit through it. I'm wondering, you know, with your son that you were referring to, was there a movie, let's say, you know, it was replaying in the theaters and you're like, okay, I got to take him to see this, you know, for the first time in, you know, so he gets to see it in theaters. Was there a movie where you took him and you were like, he has to see this, and you were like dying to see what his reaction to it was?
I have the great fortune of getting to rewatch movies all the time through his eyes. And that's one of the greatest gifts that fatherhood has ever given me, because when you watch a movie again through someone else's eyes, you get to experience it all over again yourself. And I have one answer to this. And it was just 4 years ago when they re-released E.T. for the 40th anniversary. And I had never seen E.T. anywhere other than our 27-inch TV growing up on a VHS tape. And I knew the movie backwards and forwards, but to listen to the John Williams score in a theater and to see it come to life on the big screen, and it was fully restored and remastered, you know, I was emotional. I had tears on multiple occasions that were either welling up or coming down, because it's so sweeping and it's so powerful, and it's about kids being forced to grow up. It's about a family that didn't end up going the way that those kids thought it was going to go, because it is about a divorced home. And I'm sitting there next to my son, who at the time was 8, and he was kind of in that prime Elliot age, you know, when this came out. And we got done. And one of my favorite comments he says is, I think that's the best movie I've ever seen. Now, he says that about 12 times a year, which I love. Most recently, we went and saw the Kung Fu action movie, The Furious. I took he and his friend, and we walked out, and he said, Dad, I think that's the best movie I've ever seen. But E.T., I really think he meant it. And it probably still held up there pretty high for him today. So yeah, that's the other great thing about what we get to do, is all of the movies, and the movie that we're about to talk about, they're going to last forever. They're going to last longer than I am, longer than we are. And yet there will be generations. My great grandkids will watch E.T. I know it. I know it. Even though I may never get to meet them, I know that they'll get to meet a part of my heart through Steven Spielberg's work or Chris Nolan's work. And so I feel very fortunate that we get to be a part of this, a teeny little small part of it.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. I mean, I'm about to sneeze, I think.
Let her rip.
We're live. Anything could happen.
Can I compliment that giant Batman bust behind you, by the way? That is fantastic. Is that Michael Keaton Batman bust?
100%. Yeah. The Batman I grew up with for the longest time.
Yeah.
I got it. And I was like, it's not going to be that big. And then the box came, huge box. It's Batman box, like the symbol, the yellow, the
Yeah.
iconic golden kind of bronze symbol, and I take it out, and my wife is like, "It's too big. Like that's, like you got it." I'm like, "You want me to take it back?" She's like,
Sorry, no takebacks.
Yeah. I was like, okay, like let me reach out, to you to like, or not to on eBay where I got it,
Mhm.
and I was like, hey, the wife, the wife says I gotta send it back, and they sent me a QR code. I was like, oh, I have a local post office. Like, can I do a label
Mhm.
there? And then they just were like, oh, we'll just send you this. Sent me a refund. I'm like, babe, I got it for free. We
Oh, they
gotta
just refunded it.
we
All right,
gotta
now be
keep.
honest. I'm going to ask you an interview question. Have you put
Okay.
that thing on?
It doesn't go on. It's hard plastic. Yeah.
Okay. I didn't know if it was the rubber and you had pulled that thing on.
No, I
would have
wish.
been
I
tempted.
wish.
Okay.
My stepdad, he had the whole rubber Batman suit. And early on in being my stepdad, probably just in the first couple of years I was in kindergarten, comes dressed to my kindergarten in full Michael Keaton
Oh my gosh.
Batman suit.
No way.
And he's a bigger guy, but to me,
Yeah.
I'm like, this is Batman. Like, this is epic. And
And the other
yeah,
kids thought it
yeah.
was epic as well.
Yeah, 100%. No, that Batman holds a special place in my heart for
I love it.
sure. Yeah. So I wanted to get into a little bit though of being a movie critic.
Yeah.
Have you ever walked out of a movie loving it, started writing the review, and then essentially talked yourself into liking it less after you started writing?
Yeah, like every single time. I have a rule.
Or vice versa.
Early on, I don't know if I was more ambitious. I think I was probably just a little hasty. My general rule early on was I go to the screening, I write it that night while everything's fresh in my mind. And what I realized is that method didn't leave room for things to marinate. And I was getting a lot of gut reaction that I don't want to say I regretted, but I probably, a few days on said, I should have rethought this, or this is the theme that's resonating with me. And so what I do now is my methodology, and everybody does it differently. And I don't think that there's a right or a wrong answer, is on my ride home. And I usually have about 30 to 35 minutes on my own. I just create a Google note within my phone, and I'll just talk to type the whole way home. And everything that I'm thinking, I'll just chunk in different paragraphs, just verbally. And then I leave it alone. I go to bed. And then when I wake up the next morning or whenever I reopen that doc, I just start to make sense of the things that still matter to me, or that I think really mattered or resonated with the film. And sometimes it's just 4 paragraphs of junk that I might get a few sentences out of. And sometimes I'm like, if I just move this here, or I highlight or emphasize this a little bit more, or talk a little bit more about this performance or the way that this was shot or lit, it gives me like a nice outline for my review. So my opinions usually change by a point to a point and a half overnight. And then there's been times that I might write a rough draft, and I go to a lot of film festivals, and a lot of times they'll say, hey, the embargo isn't until 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks. And by the time I go to publish, my mind might have changed entirely, and something that I really thought was a 9 just didn't stick. And maybe it's more of a 7 or a 6.5. And so, yes, I am human. I change my mind a lot, and I think that's healthy. I think that's a good thing.
I totally do too. How do you separate like this movie isn't for me from this isn't a good movie?
That's very difficult. And I think that that's something that has to come with a lot of experience. Now, thankfully, having done this and having written thousands of films, throughout time, I'm pretty good at taking my own preferences out of things and looking at craft for being what it is, right? I historically have been a little bit hesitant when it comes to horror films. Now, as of late, I think that within the genre, there's been some really nice high-end things. that I've really gotten on board with and have kind of helped me with the genre. But it's okay for me to kind of take my personal preference out of this and start looking at it in terms of story, craft, performance, resonance, theme, and I can apply that kind of mental rubric to anything I watch. And so I try to take some of my own, wow, I'm really looking forward to this, out of it, because some of the things I'm really looking forward to are the ones that end up disappointing the most. The more excited, I try to go in pretty level-headed, because the more excited I get, sometimes there are some letdowns, and I try to prevent that from happening. I want to be fair to everything and to everyone, which is why at moviearcher.com, I have a team of writers, and I have staff writers, some like my television editor, Rachel Broder, who only writes and delegates television. That's all she does. And she's great at it. And I don't have time to follow all these series, but she does. My good friend, Dave Hughes, he loves horror. And I brought him on as a staff writer because he respects the heck out of it. Whereas I felt like sometimes I was having to choke it down. So I think having a team of podcasters and of writers to kind of help me piece my way through this, it has been really an enlightening experience. And it's helped me to learn to appreciate things that maybe personally I wouldn't tend to gravitate to quite as much.
I love that. I love that. And I love the transition you just gave me, because, you know, Movie Archer describes itself as taking aim at modern entertainment, features spoiler-free reviews, and has grown to include a writing team and podcast network with different film-focused personalities. You didn't just become a critic. You eventually decided to build your own platform. What did you feel was missing from the film conversation that made you think, I want to create my own space for this?
Yeah, there's a couple of areas where I really felt like there should be a one-stop shop for people who are interested in more than just big budget. Now, I was a kid who grew up as a subscriber to Entertainment Weekly. And there were a lot of things I passed through because I wanted to get to the movie blurbs. And you would end up getting 2 or 3 sentences about 3 movies that came out that week. But in the 80s and 90s, there were a dozen, 15, 20 movies coming out that week. Yeah. They never touched international film. They never touched short films. And short films is something that I have grown to really love and have a passion for, especially independent shorts that have no marketing budget, have no funding. So I wanted to create a space when we talk about diversity in coverage. I want it to not just be diverse opinions, perspectives, writers, speakers, podcasters, YouTubers, content creators, but I wanted it to be a diversity of types of entertainment that we were covering as well. And I'm really proud of the way that we've grown and the way that we've been very representative to that aim.
I love that. Yeah, something I noticed about Movie Archer is that, you know, you've expanded beyond just your own voice. And as a critic, you're paid to have an opinion. As an editor-in-chief, you're now creating space for opinions that might be completely different from yours.
Yes.
Has building Movie Archer changed the way you listen to other people's perspectives on film?
Yes. Yeah, I think that that's a very astute question. And it's one that early on, it took me a minute to be like, well, wait a minute. But then I have to remind myself, like, I've asked people to put in a lot of time and a lot of effort professionally. And when I do that, I'm not going to bring anybody on board that I don't trust. And it doesn't mean that I trust they'll say what I would have said or write it the way I would have written it or picked up on the same themes. I need to trust that they're going to do 2 things. They're going to be fair with the material. 3 things, because the last one comes with everything. They're going to be fair with the material, but that they're also going to provide insight that people who are deciding what they want to do with their Friday or their Saturday night might not have from their couch or from their phone. It's going to give them just a little bit more than they would have had, you know, if they go to IMDb or they just watch the trailer. The third caveat that goes along with everything is everything at Movie Archer has to be spoiler free. It was one of my bugaboos as a kid when I would read a movie review and it would explain to me all the way through Act 3 of the film. It would drive me crazy. I was like, wait, I wanted to see that. What happened to the general's daughter, John Travolta? So like I needed to that's a deep pull for everybody else.
I was just gonna say that. I remember seeing that movie in theaters.
You don't need to. You're fine. You're fine. But no, I think it's important that like our job is to steer people in the direction of things that either we're passionate about or we might want to caution you about, without taking away the magic, without taking away the experience of paying your money and feeling like you're getting some value for that money in exchange for an evening out with friends, or who knows, even by yourself. At least the popcorn's always good, right? So yeah, it's important to me that people have their own space to have their own voice to whatever content they're creating or they're writing. Now, that being said, there's a little bit of me in everything because I am the editor-in-chief. Now, Rachel is the editor of everything that happens on the television side, and I just have the kind of final once over before things get published. But on the film side, I have read every single review. I have given every single editing note. So yeah, there's a little bit of me, but it's not telling them what to say. It's, could we possibly frame this argument a little bit differently? Have you considered bringing this up? So yeah, there's a little of me in everything, but it's, you know, it's everybody's work. And I'm proud of the way that that's come across.
Well, I feel like you're reading my notes because I was going to say your site makes a point of keeping its reviews spoiler free in an era where people race online to dissect every cameo and plot twist within hours. They got to be the first one. Is protecting that first viewing experience becoming harder?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we live in an age now where I know you go to a lot of movies. You've probably seen some insane theater behavior. I've seen people trying to film the entirety of a movie with their phone. I've seen people in there, you know, playing a game on their iPad. So yeah, it's important to me that people that come to moviearcher.com to read or to watch or to listen, they know that they're entering a space that is going to respect them as a viewer. And we're going to give insight and conversation, but we're not going to take the joy out of it. And I don't feel comfortable doing that to people. And so I just wanted to create a space where we could do that without, you know, stealing the magic. Because going to a movie should feel magic if it's done the right way.
I totally agree. For building out the podcast network, how did that start? And then how do you find your hosts? Do they already have something established and you're like, hey, you should be, you know, podcasting under my network? Like, how did that start and how does that happen?
Yeah, like this sounds ridiculous. Most of the ideas that I come up with happen in one of two places. Either while I'm sleeping, I will wake up and I'll say, wait a minute, I thought about this last night, or while I'm mowing the lawn. So I was mowing the lawn several summers ago, and you know, you're kind of listening to pods or doing whatever you do. And I had an inbox full of interview opportunities. As a critic, you know, they'll say, hey, come to this movie. Derek Cianfrance is going to be in town pushing Roof Man. Would you like to come to the hotel and interview him? So on and so forth. And I realized like I had done a number of print interviews, and I think they come across very well, and I'm proud of that work. But there's something special about getting to see or to hear the voices of the people who are making these movies. Passion does not always come across in print. Perhaps the passion of the person who wrote it, but when it's a, here was the question, here was the answer. I think that sometimes people want more than that. So I decided I need a place to funnel these filmmakers. And one of my first calls was Andrew Corns, who lives down in St. Louis, and he runs a show called The Revisionist Almanac. And I said, hey, let's have a meeting. I want to have a conversation about an opportunity. It's going to involve a lot more work for you. It's going to involve some great opportunities, but it's also going to provide you an opportunity to diversify your show. So long story short, he was the first on board. We always knew that we wanted somewhere in the range of 3 to 4 to 5 shows without necessarily growing too quickly. We never wanted to be hasty. We wanted to make the right choices in terms of who the hosts were, geographically where they live, maybe what they represent in terms of their personal background, their personal interests. And so it really has been a painstaking process. I'm very, very proud of the fact that right now we have 3 shows: The Revisionist Almanac, hosted by Andrew Corns, and then Jen Hahn and Sarah Callan host both TV and Us as well as Movies and Us. And I'm not in a position to make any announcements right now, but it is very possible. I'm hoping that before we get out of summer, there might be some growth on the Movie Archer Podcast Network side. So we'll wait and see on that.
Okay.
Yeah.
You don't need to tell them about me yet. Okay. Keep it to
Be careful. Be careful now.
Awesome. Yeah. Zach, who's been on Movies and Us, which is fantastic. I've been on there too. Talked to Andrew before about coming on, but it hasn't worked out yet. But yeah, I really enjoyed the diversity in the different shows that you have under the network. I think they're really fantastic. So I'm so excited to see it grow and what else comes along next. We're living in a really interesting moment where a 2-hour video essay and a written review and a 30-second TikTok can all technically be called film criticism.
You're right. And that's why we have all of those options. That's very important. Because you want to hit the marketplace wherever they want to consume. And that's why Nico Caruso, who does all of our visual content creation he does that on TikTok and he does that on YouTube. I think that's important too. And I don't want to say to anyone, well, if you're not reading film criticism, you're not engaging in the film community. I think that would be wrong on my part. I want people to engage, period. I want people to care about movies so movie theaters stay open so that we can have jobs. That's an important thing to me.
What do you think that we've gained from everyone having a platform? And in turn, what do you think we've lost?
I think what we've lost in some way is that we've lost like cohesive messaging. And I think criticism is interesting because I grew up in a time where I would read Michael Phillips every single week in the Chicago Tribune. I'm a Chicagoland area guy. I would read Roger Ebert in the Sun Times. I would read Gene Siskel in the Tribune. And that was kind of it, you know? And the more people I started to engage with, people like Richard Roper came around, WGN TV's Dean Richards, who I get to see frequently. He started showing up on the morning and the evening news. What I started to realize is like, there's room enough for everybody. Yeah. And I think each individual, you may gravitate to different critics the way that I may, as a kid or as a young adult, gravitate toward different critics. Nobody's ever going to be like, hey, we're in lockstep 100% of the time. But my key was always finding the critic that I agreed with a vast majority of the time. And then I would go to them first. And I think that history is full of examples of sometimes people have takes that evolve over time. And as some critics age, and I'm guilty of that myself, there may be people who read me 10 years ago who are like, he's lost it. He's lost a step. He's not seeing it the way I'm seeing it anymore. And that's okay. So I think it's important we have a diversity of takes out there. That being said, there's some bad takes out there. And I think that there are some unfair takes. And I think that there's a lot of, and I'm going to air quote, criticism that is being done for motivations other than the propulsion of the industry. And that is where I draw the very hard line of we're no longer being fair and open-minded to the art. We're going to talk about The Odyssey in a few minutes. And I think that there's been a bunch of criticism regarding the casting and the performance of some of the actors within The Odyssey from people that haven't seen the movie. And because they have social media or because they have X number of followers, or they are crossing a line of decency that I'm a big free speech person. I mean, free speech is how I make money, right?
Yeah.
But I don't think it's moral to provide insight if you truly don't have insight. And that's where, we got to draw the line. So yeah, there's too much of it now, but I'm all for a variety of perspectives.
Yeah. Yeah, it's very ironic that
Yeah.
we're having this conversation that is part of leading into our Odyssey review. Um, yeah, I just when you said that, it was so funny. I always just remembered like the show with Leonard Maltin talking about movies. And I grew up, my grandparents, they were, who's that actress, and and they know this
Yeah.
actress and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I just got my grandma just passed away, so I have no more grandparents anymore, but I got a
Oh,
bunch of their vinyl, and I'm listening to the original Mary Poppins, like
yeah.
on vinyl. And yeah, so I just always remember being around all different types of film, right? And even my grandma, when she was older, loved Marvel and loved the
She
Flash
did.
TV series. Yeah, like she could follow along, like it wasn't too much. And I just found it fascinating that like movies are for everyone. And I learned that at such an early age. But with social media, it has opened up movie conversation to be more about not the movie than about the
Yeah.
actual
Yeah.
movie. And so it's kind of interesting that how that's involved. And I am super excited to get into our Odyssey discussion, because I think this is going to be, I've been waiting to talk to you about this. But before we do, let's get into some fun rapid fire questions. Are you ready for this,
Okay.
my friend?
Well, I better hydrate. Yeah, let's do this.
Yeah, keep your thinking hat on too, because these are some hard ones, and we're gonna
All right.
start with this. Spielberg, Burton, or Zemeckis. You can only keep one filmography.
Oh my God. Yeah, you started, for me, you started with a tough one. So I think just because of the scope of what he's been able to cover, just in terms of the number of decades he's worked in, but also the variety of the films he's made,
Genre.
I'm going to go Spielberg.
Yeah.
He has touched almost every genre that I care about deeply. And so
Yeah.
I think it would be hard to go against Spielberg. As much respect as I have for the other two, I'm going Spielberg. Now,
Yeah.
I need an easier question next time. All right.
Okay, I got you. Yeah, my wife and I, we put on Who Framed Roger Rabbit last night, so we got a little Zemeckis action. But every time we watch it, I'm like, this is so iconic. It's so good. And every time they try and replicate something like this, it can't live up. There was a Rescue Rangers one that they did a couple years ago with Andy Samberg, where I was like, and they had like ugly Sonic in it and like all these inside jokes. I'm like, okay,
they came
a sailor
close.
sees a sailor from afar. That is as close as you could probably get.
Yeah. I think every time, you read an article or you take in some media about like the most difficult film shoots of all time, every single time Who Framed Roger Rabbit is still at the top of the list. Because if you look at, they shot that in 1988. And to have that level of quality with the infusion of animation,
So
of course,
good.
it's an absolute marvel. And
It's
now watch,
so
I'm going to talk myself out. And then one of my all-time favorite movies, Back to the Future. I mean, how can we go away from Zemeckis? And he's a Chicago guy. I got to throw that in there.
Yeah.
So yeah, Zemeckis is great. Like all those guys are special to me. I'm going to go Spielberg. I think he's the one that generationally, like my son has now, I think, seen 20 Spielberg films. And we're waiting on Schindler's List. Not that he couldn't handle it, but I think there's a magnitude that I want him to feel when we watch it. And that might be more of like a going into high school rather than a going into 7th grade. But it's on deck, and he has asked me a number of times to see it already. So we'll get there.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's go Spielberg.
Empire of the Sun? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
It also deals with heavy, not as heavy as Schindler's List, but there's a lot of meaning in that movie that you watch as a kid, and as you get older, you understand it more and more and more. And now, Christian Bale.
Isn't that another fun thing, is that you get to see the complete arc of someone's career, and he's nowhere close to being done. But I think, Christian Bale, that was the first time I saw him. And then Chris Nolan, our Batman movies, and he's got a number of really
Yeah.
exciting things coming up in the next couple of years. So it's just cool to kind of get to age with the people who you've grown familiar with through time, and then be introduced to this whole new generation of young faces that, you know, I've got a lot of respect for. Even though the older I get, it takes me more time to get to like, I don't know, is this a Lordy guy really worth it? I'm going to give him another movie to find out. And, you know, there's a little bit of like old guy prejudice that comes in on that, but it's fun to see the wheel spin time after time.
Yeah. No, I felt that with Lordy too. It really wasn't until Frankenstein where I was like, and I like Euphoria. You know what I mean? I think the actors on there are why the movie or the show was so good. Is just you got these young actors that are just so talented at a younger age. But yeah, it wasn't until Frankenstein where I was like, oh wow, like
yeah, he can do it.
Yeah, I was like, oh, he can really do it. Like without even saying anything, like the body work, the movements. I'm like, wow, what a genius. All right, we're not rapid enough because I could talk to you about this stuff for hours.
Yeah.
Movie you wish you could watch again for the first time.
Am I the age that I was when I saw it, or do I know what I know now?
You know what you know now. Yeah.
Ghost.
That's a good question, though. Ooh.
I'm going to shock you with that.
Wow.
Because when I saw it, I understood that it was about someone who died. It was about heaven. It was about hell. It was about trying to preserve whatever connection you have to a loved one. But when I saw it, I had never lost anybody that I loved. And so I had no real world perspective or experience like of just how much, and I know some people think that movie's corny, but for me, that was the first time I ever really thought about what happens, you know, after we're no longer on this earth. And so I think now, especially knowing what happened to our good friend Patrick Swayze and knowing that his career was cut short by illness, I think it's a movie that if I could go back and see it again, knowing where he ended up, knowing how close Demi came a couple of years ago at the Oscars, and just seeing kind of the full picture, knowing how much Whoopi continues to mean. That's a movie that it's just one of those, it's a lot of fun, but I also think it's a great movie. I think it's very insightful. I wish I hadn't seen it as a kid. I wish I had seen it as an adult.
That's great. You're making me want to rewatch it now. That's a really good point.
Probably doesn't fall under high art, but it's a movie that I really enjoy.
Yeah. I mean, did Whoopi won Whoopi won an Oscar for it, right?
She did. Yeah.
Yeah. Incredible. A movie critics got wrong. So I guess a movie you got wrong? No. I guess general consensus.
How hot do you want this take?
Scorching.
I could have people mad at us right now.
Scorching. Let's go. We're getting to the Odyssey. People are going to get hot either which way. Oh,
critics loved Oppenheimer, and I really enjoyed 2/3 of Oppenheimer. I thought the first two acts were absolutely inspired, and to shoot on the magnitude that he did in IMAX and to have all of that capability at his disposal and to spend the last 70 or so minutes of white guys talking in a small room, it felt so minimal given the presentation and the capabilities of the film. I'm not saying it's a bad film. I'm saying that people gave it a pass over a lot of areas that I had a difficult time with. So it is a Best Picture winner. It always will be. I'm very happy that Chris Nolan won Best Director for Oppenheimer. I think it's a very good movie. I don't think it's as great, just my opinion, as a lot of people have said. And again, that's scorching hot take because I know I am in the vast minority on that perspective.
A movie audiences got wrong.
Michael this year. Guys, it made a lot. It made $1 billion now, I think.
Yeah, and it is. It's the highest grossing biopic of all time.
You are
not
correct.
Just musical. Yeah.
I have an allergy to movies that are dishonest. And I like Antoine Fuqua. I thought there were some nice performances in this movie. I thought Jafar Jackson was great. The music is, you can't argue with the quality of the music and what it has
Right.
meant to history. But the entire thing felt very plastic and very disingenuous and very forced. And the more stories you read about, well, we had to do a bunch of rewrites and some reshoots because, you know, the Jackson estate wouldn't allow certain parts of the story to be told. It felt
Right.
very, very manufactured. And I know audiences loved it, and I love that they loved it because that means they went to the movies. And I'm very happy they
Yes.
went to the movies. Some families went and saw it multiple times, and I thank them. That's great. It's not a good movie. It's just not. My taste, my perspective. Just, it did not work for me on a lot of levels.
Yeah. No, I get that. I get that. It wasn't really trying to tell
Nope.
the whole thing. It was trying to showcase how many hits saw, like how just good of an artist he is, which I
Yeah.
totally get.
But
And-
Spotify can tell us that story, right?
Yeah.
And by the
Yeah,
way,
100%.
where's Janet? Where's Janet? She wasn't in that movie.
I know.
She said no, thank you.
Yeah.
And so, like, again, that's not an honest.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
not an
exactly.
honest portrayal.
All biopics are manufactured though.
Yep.
That's
Yep.
100%.
I understand the people who loved it, and I appreciate them. It wasn't for me.
Most underrated director working today.
Oh my goodness. That's a really hard question. I'm going to give you two names, and they're both very, very recent. One won an Academy Award last year for a short film called The Singers. His name is Sam Davis. Sam Davis is traditionally, he's a cinematographer. And upon his first shot at making his own independent short, he makes this movie, The Singers. And it was a movie that I saw at Tribeca a couple of years ago. And it knocked me out of my shoes. It was like about 18 or 19 minutes long. It's an adaptation of an old Russian short story by Ivan Turgenev. And The Singers is awesome. It's on Netflix now. It's been picked up by Netflix, so you can watch it. Sam Davis has an incredible eye for some of the gritty details in life. And I'm going to give you a couple of other names. One is Ramel Ross, who, for whatever reason, is not getting the funding to make the movies he needs to make. Ramel Ross should have been nominated for Nickel Boys a couple of years ago. He is an outstanding filmmaker who I think is being underrepresented and underappreciated. So there's two names right there. And then I'm going to give you another independent director who I really think has got a good thing going. Her name is Lillian Merrill, and she made a movie called Honey June, and it's making the rounds right now. It's done premieres in New York, in Chicago, in LA. She won a $1 million prize at Tribeca several years ago, and she took that into the production of Honey June. It's a story that is very funny. It's about cultural evolution between mothers and daughters. It's about remorse. It's about saying a final goodbye, and it's shot on a beautiful location on the Azores Islands. So Lillian Merrill is another name that I think people should look out for. None of these people, I think, are household names other than Sam Davis, who now has an Academy Award. But I would check all of them out, and I think they've got better things to come. But I wanted to give a little credit to all of them.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. Yeah, I didn't know he was the cinematographer for Dee Dee, right?
Yes.
Yeah. I didn't
Dee
realize
Dee people haven't seen Dee Dee. You want to know what it's like to be a ninth grader. Watch Dee Dee. That is a movie that really moved me, and it gave me, you get people shaking their fist at teenagers a lot. And you want to talk about like showing a little bit of empathy for people. I think that's a great movie.
Favorite movie theater snack?
Oh, I'm a traditionalist. I'm a popcorn guy. Too much, too
Anything
often.
in it? Anything in the popcorn?
No, I'm a salt only. So I got this tough relationship with my doctor. My doctor says, "Hey, let's slow down on that movie theater butter." So I got to listen. And then, of course, I want like that two-handed Mountain Dew to like keep me going. And again, Doc's like, "Hey, let's pump the brakes on some of this caffeine." So I've transitioned. I'm a popcorn and an icy guy. So as I age, I guess I've got to age in my snacks. What about you? Are you a candy guy at the movies?
Yeah, a lot of times, Whole Foods is a part of the mall, like where the Regal we go to is. And so like this for Odyssey, it was a 6 o'clock. So I had dinner. I got a chicken Caesar wrap. But
did you eat it in the Odyssey?
Yeah.
You were like hail chicken Caesar while you were watching this great Greek myth. Okay.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. And but typically, I'm a sucker for popcorn.
Yeah.
And I like to put the peanut butter M&Ms in there, but Erica does not like peanut butter, so I tend to not do that. And then I get something chocolate, she gets Sour Patch Kids, and then because I go to the movies so much, it's like free popcorn because I have all these points from going.
It's funny, like we recently got back from a long trip, and the entire time we were gone, obviously I didn't go to a movie theater. My wife probably would have murdered me while we were gone. But getting to go back and have movie theater popcorn and just smell it like for the first time, it is the closest thing to an addiction I know. Because like I was like, oh,
This is my wife. This is my wife commenting right now.
Look, Erica, you're doing life the right way. And Erica, I salute you. I think it would be very bad broadcasting if we were eating popcorn, but I'm glad you can do it for us.
Yeah. Okay, final one. I got a bunch more, but let's get it. I'm dying to get into the Odyssey.
Yeah.
The movie you've rewatched more than any other.
Back to the Future. I think I've seen Back to the Future 50 times easily. When I was young, I did not have unlimited income in terms of what I could buy on VHS.
Right.
So I was probably one of like my closest 20 friends that I had on that little shelf that I went to most often. I've talked about my son a lot. It's a movie I showed him when he was probably 5. We revisited it when we were just away on vacation. We had kind of a rainy day, and it's on Netflix, and he's like, hey, let's check Back to the Future out. So we did that again. So 50 times. I'll watch it 200 times before I die.
I love that. I love that. To be honest, I think I might be more a Back to the Future 2 guy.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. You want to talk about hot takes?
I love the first one, but as a kid going into the future, because I'm it was just like, it was so epic. And then all the things they predicted that came to pass. But no,
do you remember what year they went forward to?
Yeah, 2015, October 15th, right? I think. Yeah.
Well, was it November 5th, or that was November 5th, 1955 that they went back to?
Yeah.
My son was born in 14, so he had a good time seeing them go forward to the year after he was born, which is completely bonkers.
Yeah, I love it. I mean,
they
won. The Cubs won the October 21st, 2015.
Okay.
Very close. Okay.
There we go. Cubs won the World Series then.
Adam, this has been awesome. I think what I love about talking to critics is realizing that, underneath all the reviews and scores and analysis, it still starts with someone who just loves movies. And I think I can't think of a better way to put everything we just talked about to the test than with one of the biggest movies of the year. So you've got the critic perspective. Yeah. I've got the passionate movie fan perspective.
We both do. Yeah.
And we both do. And we both just saw Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. So Adam, let's talk about this movie. I'm going to intro us in because, Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey was easily one of the most anticipated movies of the entire year. And we had coming some bangers. And you're talking about Christopher Nolan coming off of Oppenheimer, an almost $1 billion film, taking on a story that's literally thousands of years old, assembling one of the most stacked casts we've seen in a long time, and somehow attempting to turn Homer's epic into this massive summer blockbuster. And before the movie even came out, there was obviously a lot of noise surrounding it. There were conversations about the casting, some pretty ugly backlash toward the diversity of this cast, and questions about whether audiences would actually show up for a nearly 3-hour adaptation of the ancient Greek epic. Well, I think audiences have answered that question because the Odyssey opened up to roughly 258 million worldwide. I think that number has even changed since I wrote this, giving Nolan the biggest global opening of his career. So I think people wanted to see this movie. But now
the hype is real.
The hype was real, but now comes the bigger question. Did Christopher Nolan actually pull this off? Because I think there's a fascinating conversation to have about how to take something as old, dense, and culturally significant as the Odyssey and turn it into a movie that can play to a modern blockbuster audience without losing what made this story endure for thousands of years. So we're going full spoilers here, you guys. We're going to talk about what worked, what didn't, the performances, the filmmaking, some of those absolutely insane set pieces, and ultimately where the Odyssey lands in Christopher Nolan's filmography to us. Adam, you're the professional here. I'm really curious, and I've been messaging you asking, and I'm glad
I've been very elusive.
I've been dying. So I'm really curious where you landed on this one. Walking out of the theater, what was your immediate reaction to Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey? And now that you've sat with it a little bit, is it still that same feeling?
No, it is not the same feeling that I walked out of the theater with. My appreciation for the work and for my anticipation of seeing it again has only grown. And that is something that has happened before. And it's a really good sign for the way that I think The Odyssey is going to age, just in terms of my perspective. So full disclosure, as I mentioned, my family and I, we were away for a number of days, and I was not around when the critic screening of The Odyssey happened. I'm very lucky. I have a team of staff writers. And so Nick Zednick, one of my writers, he wrote our Movie Archer review. It was glowing. I read it. I edited it long before I was even able to see the movie because he saw it weeks ago. Again, it's spoiler free, so I felt very comfortable doing that. There are few movies that as much as I try to temper my enthusiasm and keep a level head, and then I walk out and I'm like, that exceeded my expectations. The Odyssey is one of those movies. It exceeded my expectations. Now, that's not to say that I thought it was a perfect film by any means. And I know we are going to talk about some of the places where we had friction points with it, and there was more than one for me. But just in terms of that, you ever get goosebumps in the movie theater? Does that happen to you?
Oh, yeah.
It happened to me 3 times. 3 times watching this movie where I felt like I was kind of hovering somewhere above my seat. I forgot I was in a theater. I was completely transported. And look, I'm glad that you brought up some of the manufactured faux criticism that came along long before people ever saw this movie. Because if those people actually sit down and watch this movie, I don't see how anyone with an honest and critical eye cannot say that's why we built movie theaters.
Yeah. I hated it. No, I'm just kidding. For me, it's been an Odyssey in its own right because, this is such a dense movie. And even though it is 3 hours, they fit a lot in it. And there's a lot that happens with a lot of different people who are on their own journeys. And so it took me a minute, and I knew that I really enjoyed it, but I had to sit with it. And I got home and my wife's like, so like, how was it? And I'm like, I liked it a lot. I don't know what to say right now. I'm never really at a loss for words when it comes to movies, but I think I was so like entrapped in the movie itself. It took me a little while to like come out of it and really look at it as a whole, because I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's my favorite Christopher Nolan movie, but I also think this is such a fascinating swing for him because of the material he's adapting. Like, one of the things I kept thinking about is that Nolan had to make choices to make a story that's thousands of years old accessible to a huge modern audience.
Yes.
When Nolan makes movies now, everyone's eyes are on it. And I think he's aware of that, but I don't think he cares because he's going to make the movie that he wants to make.
And I think he's earned the right to do that as well.
Oh, 100%. And he's had this movie in his mind for a very long time, even going back to Troy when, as we know, he was supposed to direct it. So even the vision of him with, you know, the horse sticking out of the water, I mean, it's been ingrained, you know, in his memory for a very long time. And so I actually think some of those choices helped the movie a lot, and maybe were some friction points for me as well, which we're going to get into. But overall, I thought this was an incredible theatrical experience. This is why you go to the movies. And there are individual sequences and moments in this movie that are going to stick with me for a very long time. And it took me a long time to pick my jaw from off the floor because of like how I was just so enamored with how he did it and how visceral and like real it felt. So that is my feeling. Let's talk a little bit.
Can I give you a comp really quick? Like a lifetime comparable.
Please.
Do you remember the scene in Jurassic Park where as an audience we were first introduced to the dinosaurs? Do you remember that?
Of my when he takes off his glasses and he looks
and she turns his head up to see,
Yeah.
and the camera sweeps and Spielberg shows us. And by the way, rest in peace to Sam Neill, because I'm going to mention him here.
Yes.
The Odyssey made me at times, and the shot that you have up on the screen right now was one of those times. It made me feel like I was a kid seeing the dinosaurs again for the first time. I had never seen dinosaurs like that before. I have never been a part of the Trojan War. I've never been to Ithaca. I had never seen a Cyclops like that, right? So all of these different moments were so awe-inspiring. And then you couple them with the fact that the guy made this movie practically. And if this were in the hands of a lesser studio or a lesser filmmaker,
yes,
this would have been a CG nightmare. And who knows what role AI or whatever other editing software would have been involved. But he refused to do that because he had too much respect for the story and he had too much respect for the audience. And I love that. And I say that respect in a good way. And so I was just enamored on a number of occasions at just how good it made me feel to be in that movie, seeing it with a general audience, not a room full of critics like I usually do.
Do you think it felt like a traditional Christopher Nolan movie, or did you see him stretching himself as a filmmaker? I
really enjoyed Dunkirk. There was the nonlinear kind of surprise as we put all the pieces together. I found Tenet, maybe it was just the time when it came out. I found Tenet, it felt pretentious to me, and I felt like just because you can, should you? And I bet I brought some of that negativity with me into Oppenheimer.
Interesting.
And I got to be honest with you, by the time I walked out of Oppenheimer with that final act of the movie, by the end of 2023, I didn't really know how I felt about Christopher Nolan. I didn't.
Wow.
I respected a lot of the movies he had made in the past. And some of the movies he made years and years ago are still tops of my list here. But The Odyssey proved me wrong. And when I say it didn't feel like a Chris Nolan movie, it felt like all of the things that he does so well. And he erased all of what I have maybe misconstrued in the past as pretension or over ambition from the editing department. And he just told the dang story, as complex as it is. And I think in that sense, as complicated as The Odyssey is, he simplified it to a way that made it digestible to even a broader audience than maybe he could have even imagined. And I think that might end up being the resonating greatness of the Odyssey.
Yeah, no, I definitely felt that. I definitely felt that. And that's what I was saying, you know, like I don't think people understand, like, the Odyssey is a very intricate, dense piece of literature, and it's insanely hard to adapt into a film that is just on this stage, this kind of epic, if you will. And so I needed to sit within, like, take a step back, because, like, I was so immersed in the movie. It took me a while to, like, really digest what I just saw there in the way that it was told, you know, with in the cinematographer that he's used her for a few movies now. She does this thing where she kind of incorporates scenes from, like, his past, and obviously it lends well to Odysseus, who's trying to remember, you know, memories of his past, but it kind of gives you a callback to something that happened while something else is happening. And so you're going full circle in the moment to really understand what this person is going through right now, what you are seeing. And I found that really fascinating, the way that he and the cinematographer worked to show that to the audience. And I felt like that was one of the stronger things, because it felt like we are Odysseus, that we are living through his memories. And once we're in the memories, we're there. We're with the Cyclops. We're trying to get, you know, past the sirens without without hearing them. Like, we are in it. And so I thought that choice was really smart into bringing people into Odysseus's journey. And I really enjoyed that aspect of it. It was interesting to me.
You know, we live in a day and an age where marketing kind of controls too many decisions. And the idea of making a 3-hour movie, I think, can turn off a lot of audiences. I know The Brutalist faced a lot of backlash a few years ago for that very same reason. And I think, again, in the hand of a weaker filmmaker or a weaker studio, they would have made this into 2 or 3 parts. And I'm so thankful that they didn't. But the thing that really just crushed me about this movie in the best way possible is probably the way that, like, a food critic would feel after, like, a 9-course tasting. There's no way to digest your feelings on this walking out of the theater. I watched more couples walk out of this theater in silence, in silent contemplation, not in silent disappointment, than I did people saying, oh, and then this happened, and then this happened. It was almost like we forgot what it feels like to experience an epic. We went on an Odyssey, and to experience an epic wears you out. How do you think Odysseus
100%.
felt? I felt worn out. But gang, that's the point, right?
Yeah.
And they used to make movies like that. And that's why I'm so happy that somebody as gifted as Chris Nolan was willing to make people feel that way. So mission accomplished. I applaud him for doing something that people have probably tried to talk him out of.
100%. Yeah. And it's interesting because, you know, adapting a thousands-year-old story into a modern blockbuster is no easy feat. And I feel like this is probably where I had some mixed feelings, because I think Nolan clearly wanted to make this movie be accessible. He didn't make something that requires you to have to, like, read the Odyssey before walking into the theater.
Yeah.
And I think that was absolutely the right decision. But there were moments, particularly early on, where some of the modernization actually took me out a little bit. And I wanted to address this because there was so much backlash and all these things before even anyone saw a single frame of the movie, which is absolutely ridiculous. But now that I've seen the movie, let's talk about it. Let's talk about the accents. Let's talk about the modernization of this old film. And I'm not saying that it was bad. I'm just giving my experience, because I think the American accents were one of those things where, especially at the beginning, I was very aware that I was watching modern actors playing these ancient characters. And it took me a little bit to adjust to that. But what's interesting is that the further I got into the journey, the less I started to notice it. And eventually I stopped thinking about the actors and started seeing the characters. So I'm going to keep saying this journey metaphor, but I want to be honest in the criticism of this film and to use modern language, English, modern American accents.
It's what it was.
It's what it was. And I understand why he did it. And did it affect me in the beginning? Totally. It took some adjusting period. But by the end of the movie, I was like, this is Odysseus. This is Penelope. Like, this is Telemachus.
Yeah.
And so it did take me on a journey. Did it do that for you at all? Did you get that at all?
Yeah, it did. And I got to be honest, I agree with what you're saying in terms of the accents. I'm just happy that there was accent continuity throughout the film. I think 100%. A lot of that decision making was predicated on the fact that Matt Damon is the star of the movie. He wasn't doing a Boston accent, but I don't know how comfortable he goes outside of an American register, at least not in my memory of him as a performer. I think that they made the right choice, and I liken watching The Odyssey a little bit to like getting in the swimming pool. The first minute you're in the swimming pool, you're often feeling a little uncomfortable, and then you get used to it and you have a lot of fun. And I think that The Odyssey, I said under my breath, oh no, within the first 5 minutes. I said it because, and we'll talk about individual performances, but I had to practice patience. And about 5 minutes after that, those feelings were gone. And I think in hindsight, he made the decisions that were right for the entirety of the production of hundreds of actors, probably 25 of whom could lead a movie on their own.
Yes.
And so there had to be a through line. And I think he made the choice that was the right choice, because there was probably 50 wrong choices. And I could see why people might bristle at that a little bit, but it ultimately did not bother me.
Yeah. Matt Damon is very famous. And as we've seen, there's also been discussion about whether the cast is almost too famous. I guess they didn't know that, Kirk Douglas was very famous in Spartacus.
Yeah,
I guess they didn't know that these things happen. And you're watching Matt Damon instead of Odysseus. For me, at the end, I'm like, this is Odysseus. Like it really pulled me in, and I didn't feel that. Are you recognizing celebrity before character? Did you experience that at all?
I would say that to a general public, the fact that they're going to go probably see Spider-Man in a couple of weeks, and they're going to see 3 of these exact same actors performing in that as well. I think celebrities do sell movies, contrary to what a lot of people think now. But you said, these people were famous. Well, how the heck did they get famous? Because they're really good at it, right? And when you're Christopher Nolan and you're making this $300 million plus production, you want people that are really good at it, right?
Definitely.
And so I think he chose the people that fit the roles to his liking. I'm not saying that all of them were either the right choice or were perfect, but I think he chose people that are currently at the height of their power, that they are either ascending or they are stabilized in terms of their performances. And I think you don't want to take a lot of chances on a movie like this.
Let me ask you, in a ensemble that's this enormous with arguably some of the best actors doing it today, there is a lot of performances that really stood out to me.
Oh yeah.
I wanted to ask you, who surprised you the most in this enormous ensemble?
I have names that I liked the most, but in terms of who
Uh-huh.
surprised me the most, can I give you two? One's positive and one is not.
Yes, please.
Okay, the person that surprised me the most, and I'm ashamed to admit this, was John Leguizamo. Um, it has been so long that I've felt connected to a character that he's played. I don't want to say I kind of wrote him off, but he's also he's just felt like he's there. He's a recognizable face, but he's just another character. And maybe he's been typecast a little bit on that side, but he
Yeah.
manufactured, along with the writing, a character that was so deep and layered and emotionally resonant and created a form of sympathy that I think the audience needed. His character's name was Eumaeus. And I loved everything that he did. And I did not expect to love. I thought he was just going to be John Leguizamo in The Odyssey. And maybe that's unfair to say, but I thought he was outstanding. Outstanding. Now, there's other people I love, and I know that we're going to get to talk about them because I'm guessing that there's going to be a couple of acting nominations to come out of this movie, and one who I think is
one of which
is probably the front runner right now. But I got to say, I didn't love the entirety of Tom Holland's performance. I think he is very apt in the physical sequences. I thought he sells that very well. I think he's a gifted physical actor. There were some line readings early on in Ithaca as he was talking with his mom, Penelope, played by a brilliant Anne Hathaway, that I was like, oh no. It felt a touch wooden. It felt like he was acting. And then I said, well, look at this. He put the best actress in his movie, probably the best actor, period, in the movie, in Anne Hathaway, to balance maybe whatever shortcomings Tom Holland had within this source material. I think he's a great Spider-Man, and I think he fits that really well. Swords and Sandals may not be his game. I don't know if I'd be excited to watch him lead a movie of this nature, but he settled in, and he was always surrounded by bigger actors than him. And I don't mean physically. People who have a little bit more depth and a little bit more range. And I think he should send a bouquet to Anne Hathaway because she bailed him out a few times. So I like Tom Holland. I didn't love all of his delivery within this. So those are my two surprises.
Wait, what's funny? I got the same kind of feeling with Orlando Bloom and Troy, where it was very similar, that like he just didn't, the way that he was like delivering his lines, it just took me out of it. It didn't fit in.
You can feel that.
And I think Tom Holland is a better actor than Orlando Bloom, but I was getting a little bit of the same vibes. And I think because it's broken up, you see him like a little bit in the beginning, a little sprinkle here, a little sprinkle at the end, that it's better for his performance that you don't stay with him the whole time. But I felt a little bit of that as well. And I really enjoy him. I think he's better than just Spider-Man. Like, I love The Impossible. I love How I Live Now, which is a great movie. Same director of what was it, King of Scotland, where what's his name was awesome. Last King of Scotland. Yeah. Really, really good movies. A lot of them people have not seen. So I think you're right. It's hard to do a Sword and Sandals and make it feel real with an American accent. That's doing a lot and expecting like to be great. That's a lot.
Yeah. And I think the more physicality that his character Telemachus jumped into, the more it helped him. And I think it put him at ease because that's kind of his comfort zone. It was like, hey, go out there and throw your 90-mile-an-hour fastball, deliver a line here and there. And some of my friction disappeared with his performance. But when it was standing and talking in a room, especially early on, I don't know if that's going to go on the career highlight reel.
Yeah, I don't think so, unfortunately. All right, who else you got?
I think Anne Hathaway gave a career best performance, and I say that knowing that she's already won an Academy Award. I think she anchored for the audience and was given a real uphill battle because what did she basically do? She sat on a rooftop or she sat in a room behind a screen, right? And she was able to encapsulate all of the feelings that Penelope needed to, starting with a potential widower or a widow, right? She's lost her husband, realistically, trying to be a role model for her son. How do you teach a young man to become a man in an age when women were not given any sort of responsibility or leadership opportunities? And yet she found a strength that she could convey to her son. She also had to demonstrate a strength in her own morality. And we're going to talk about Zeus's law quite a bit. She didn't want all these 50 people in her castle drinking her wine and eating her food for all these years, but she had an obligation to her own belief system and to her morality to continue to host these people that she didn't want there. And yet she did it because she knew it was the right thing when it came to honoring a power that was greater than her. And I think Anne Hathaway wrapped all of that up. What a year she's having. She's one of my favorite actresses. I think she's a lock for a nomination. And I think right now she might be the leader in the clubhouse for another Academy Award in the Best Supporting category.
I think so as well. I think Matt Damon rubs me the wrong way sometimes. I think
tell me more about that.
Yeah, I don't know. Not in the movie. In general, I've had a history of Matt Damonisms where some people just kind of rub you the wrong way, and I've enjoyed his movies, and I enjoy him, and and even in like in Air and Ford v Ferrari, like I think it's great performances. It doesn't rub me as so much that it takes me out or makes me not enjoy the movie. But I think his performance in this movie might be my favorite performance because, and he's talked about it, but you can tell like this is the hardest performance that he has done in his entire career. And he's been doing this an extremely long time, but to carry this movie with already some of the greatest actors doing it today and still feel like this is his movie and his journey and what he goes through. I thought that was really incredible. And I think it was written really well. You mentioned Zeus's law, and this keeps coming up throughout the entire movie. And it's really the crux of Odysseus's whole journey is this honor that he has. But the most honorable man who follows Zeus's law tricked a lot of people and ended up murdering families and children and women and horrible things that he saw firsthand, that he had firsthand part in being the catalyst for it. And so it was very interesting to see him play this character who has all this guilt and is an honorable man and cares about the honor of his men that he constantly looks out for, even though they start to turn on him pretty quickly. And rightfully so, based on being stubborn in his own beliefs, in his own morals, that he holds true to himself, that he has standards that he expects other people to hold true to themselves. And so I really fell in love with his performance throughout the movie. And I think it really proved that he is one of the best actors doing it today, that he's been doing this for a very long time, but it made me a believer. And I was very impressed.
The list of people that could have done what he did in this movie is very, very short.
100%.
I think people have accused him of being safe, of being predictable. Some people have said he's like a same actor. He's the same in everything. I don't necessarily agree with that. He had to be the epicenter of this massive epic. But I think the way that he played it was perfect because, as you mentioned, he was an imperfect person. He did fall victim to his own hubris on a number of occasions, and it cost lives, not his own, but his other men. And I think that he gave us enough reasons to continue to love him, even though he was a dynamic character. And Chris Nolan has at times historically created some very static characters. And I want to say that he has learned
True.
from his filmography. And this is not just the story of look at this great man and all the things he did. Let's bail him out along the way. This was more of this is a deeply flawed man who at one point in his life viewed himself as a hero. He no longer feels that way and he needs to go home. Right. And that's kind of the arc that a lot of people go on in their own lives. And so I appreciate that. I think the film quite notably took all of the sex that he had with women other than Penelope out that does exist within the epic poem. I mean, he spent 7 years with Calypso. You saw The Island, you saw Charlize. We can put 2 and 2 together, right? But they never showed that. And I think that allowed the audience to stay on his side, which for an adaptation, I think was a pretty shrewd move on Nolan's part. I don't think Homer was quite as forgiving to Odysseus as Chris Nolan was, but it's living in a different day and age. I really liked what Damon did here. I don't know if it's going to surpass his work in The Talented Mr. Ripley for me in terms of his career filmography.
Yeah,
I think that's the best he's been personally.
That's the first time I didn't see Matt Damon in the character. That's the first time I was like, whoa. And and back then I was like, I was a big, like I love Gattaca. And so like I was a big Jude Law, like not just pretty boy Jude Law from the Christmas movies, but like really I was like, oh wow. Like, and then I saw the movie and I was like, oh wow, he's not even the person that I love. So that's what I'm saying. Like, just because he rubs me the wrong way, it's not like one of those ones where I'm like, I hate it. I hate everything he's in. Like, I think people do that.
He's too good for that.
To Timothy Chalamet. I think they do that to him now because they do say a lot of people like to use the overexposed expression, but I really think Nolan uses Matt Damon in the right way. And this is why he is such a good filmmaker, is because what he does to pull out these performances in these already great actors, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, even the small part in Interstellar, it feels like a whole character. You're only with Matt Damon for a very short amount of time, but you feel like you were with him the whole movie. You know what I mean? And that's
a small, big part. Yeah.
It's a small, big part. It's a huge catalyst for the movie, but for the story. But yeah, I just feel like Christopher Nolan knows how to use Matt Damon probably better than any filmmaker has before. So I think that is really how that performance came out. So I think we have another nomination here as well.
Yes, I think that's very likely. And I think that we're going to have a very interesting Oscars coming up, because I do think
I'm so excited.
Get a lot of nominations, but I think there's some other movies coming out that people are going to be excited about. And I think we might get some classic Hollywood names involved in this, which it feels like maybe we haven't had as many of those lately. I think this could end up being a very exciting award year.
Me and my co-host, one of my frequent guest hosts, Zach, we did a live stream of reporting the Oscars, and that was so fun. That was like, we had people coming in the room that just discovered it randomly. Like, it was, the algorithm was like pushing it out. So it was one of the best times I've had streaming. And man, there's something magic about the Oscars still. I don't know. I'm not a hater when it comes to the Oscars. We grew up on it,
I'll be here as long as they are.
I want to talk to you about the filmmaking aspect, specifically, this part. I have so much to say. It's obviously the Cyclops moment, and I just have to talk about it because this was one of the standout moments, arguably, of the entire movie for me. This might have been the moment where I went from really enjoying the Odyssey to thinking like, oh my God, Nolan has actually really done this. Like, I was captivated and my jaw was on the floor. And what I loved about the entire cave sequence is that it felt generally horrifying to me. Nolan
Oh
doesn't
yeah.
suddenly turn the movie into like some glossy CGI creature feature, but like there's something tactical and dangerous about it. The darkness and the scale and the tension, and especially the sound. Like you feel trapped in the cave with them, and it almost becomes a horror movie for that stretch. And I felt like it was absolutely incredible the way that it was executed. I was completely enamored. It was probably at this moment where I was in the story and I couldn't get out of it. What did you think about the Cyclops cave scene? Because it's been done in other mediums and other movies. We've seen it, but it just felt so visceral and so real the way that
Yeah.
Nolan presented this classic Cyclops scene to us.
Yeah, it hasn't been done like this. And I think you very astutely pointed out the first thing that you get in the sound or in the cave is the sound design, right? And you get the echo of every single line of dialogue that's being delivered. And that echo has a haunting feeling to it. That echo reminds you that this is not normal. This is not okay. And then he strips away visually, and we lose lighting. And so when we do that on top of having that kind of unique and haunting echo, it becomes very clear that this has become a monster movie. And this monster movie is something that we now as an audience need to escape from, just like the soldiers did within the cave. So I just thought it was a work of absolute mastery.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you look at this, I mean, the puppetry that they use, like this is just insane.
Yeah.
And then they obviously used the real actor to
A body
embody
double, yeah.
yeah, the
Like again,
Cyclops
kudos
presence.
to them for not making this out of CG, because that would have been the cheaper and the easier route to take. And
Mhm.
they did it the hard way, right? And this scene
Yes.
reminded me of what Steven Spielberg did with Jaws. He did it the hardest way possible. They could have filmed Jaws in a tank in a studio, and they didn't, right? And so I'm just happy that he was willing to challenge himself and to challenge his audience, who might be used to seeing more of a beast than we actually saw.
Totally.
And it just makes it such a visceral experience, and it's tactile. You could almost know what the Cyclops' skin felt like if you had like reached out
Yes.
or brushed past. And that is so hard to do. And that's why, like, when people are hard on this movie, or hard like I have been on Chris Nolan, like, we better stop and check a little bit. He's playing at a level of difficulty that I don't think any other director is right now.
I totally agree. I think this scene alone, I mean, this is going to be taught in film classes. Like this is, it should, and I hope it will. I mean, if they're a good teacher, you're going to be showing them this scene, because you're right. It wasn't just about the massiveness of it, right? Like them trapped in a cave with a Cyclops. It was really the tension. Like, are they going to get out? Are they not? Like, what's up with the sheep? Like, what's up with the cheese? You know, like there's like so many things. And
what's up with the hay that they're strapping to themselves?
Yeah.
And every little bit paid off.
Every little bit paid off. And you see the tension between him and his right-hand man. I forgot his name. I think he's South Asian actor, and he's really fantastic. Going to be in the new X-Files with Ryan Coogler's X-Files. So it's like it's setting up so much more of what we're going to see in such a small scene that you're entrapped in, because it's like it's so shocking. I mean, the wails of him in agony were just horrific. Him then speaking in English, and you're in it, and it's just, you're in awe of what is happening, because it feels like you're there, and it feels like this could actually happen. And so I found it really incredible. And I think a big part of that is using IMAX cameras. I think using IMAX cameras was such an interesting way to film this movie, something that Christopher Nolan has been dying to do since he discovered IMAX film, was film an entire movie in IMAX. And we actually have a take from Zach, one of my guest hosts, a little bit about what he felt about using IMAX and about the movie in general. Why don't we take a look at Zach's take tomorrow? Now, hold on one second.
Come on, Zach,
Okay.
hit us with it.
Here we go. You can't hear it?
No.
Okay. That's unfortunate. Let me see. Let's see.
Zach looks very enthusiastic about this IMAX take.
Let me see. Can you see this?
I can see it.
I mean, can you hear this? This is going to be the whole screen, so it's going to take us off.
That's fine.
Can you private message or yeah? Do you know how to private comment?
Can
you hear me?
learn quickly.
Okay. I just want to see if it's working when I play it. Just hit me on Instagram and give me a thumbs up,
Yep.
okay?
All right.
Hey, Evan. And hey, all the Evanites out there that watch the Evan Edition every single week. You know me, I'm Zach. I'm on here every other week. And I just want to give my quick thoughts on The Odyssey. I think that this is a movie that got a little bit too overhyped for me. So I went in thinking this was going to be the greatest thing ever, where I was like, this is a really good to great movie, but there's something that missing in that first 30 to 40 minutes to get me emotionally attached to 47 different characters at one time and care about all their arcs. I think that all the performances are great on a technical level. I think the movie is great. Louis Gorton is fantastic, but I think shooting at IMAX was a bit of a mistake because you can't zoom too out in IMAX. And I think that there was too many tight shots. I couldn't enjoy the grand escapism of this because everything felt so close up. But there were so many cool sequences, so many cool emotional moments towards that last 30 minutes, but everything before that I felt a little detached, even though I was excited by some of the craziest things I've ever seen before on film.
So he says a couple things in here, but one of which I found very interesting because there's a lot of moments that are huge in scale, specifically the siege of Troy. I'm just wondering, based on what Zach said about his feelings about maybe the detriments of using IMAX, that maybe some of it was too close and it took away from the magnitude of the sets and what you're seeing in the picture. Did you get that feeling at all while watching the movie?
No. And like with respect to Zach, I don't necessarily agree with that take. I do agree with what he said about the
That's
first
okay.
30 minutes and how there being like a little bit of, it was kind of like a little bit of an exposition dump and it took a little time to get into it. I agree with all that. All right. In terms of capturing the scope of a physical image, there is no technology greater than IMAX, and in particular IMAX 70 millimeter, to give us that. And I don't want our audience to mistake. I know Zach used the term zoom, as in he couldn't zoom out. Zoom is not the same as an establishment of camera distance by camera position. And I think you mentioned just before leading into this that there's a lot of tremendous scope that does get captured. And by shooting in 70, we're getting that scope laterally and vertically. Mm-hmm. And so I would make the counter argument that the only way to shoot an epic of this nature is to shoot it on IMAX. And now, remember, I'm the same guy who said I didn't like the third act of Oppenheimer because it was just old white guys talking in a small room, right?
Yep.
It makes you feel the claustrophobia of shooting indoors more because the comparison of the scope that you can achieve outdoors is so much greater. Does that make sense? And so yeah. I think the claustrophobia that we felt within the castle in Ithaca is heightened because of the capabilities of shooting on IMAX. So I actually think it gave us a broader range of capabilities. So yes, the tight felt very tight, but the large scope shots like the Whirlpool, just as an example, felt
Right.
massive. And I want a movie like this to feel massive. So agree with part of what Zach said, but not all of it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I agree with you. I didn't get that sense because I was living with these characters.
Mhm.
The way that it was filmed feels like you're with them, like you're there, like you're living this experience.
Yes.
And I don't think you'll get that same experience when you're shooting on digital or what have you. I think when you shoot on IMAX, because it shows so much of this in this, you feel like you're kind of sitting in the picture. And
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that about the film.
It's closer to seeing the world the way that we see the world.
Yes, 100%. I mean, if you look at these scenes, I mean, I forgot what it is. I just call it no man's land for some reason. It's definitely not called that. But even in this sequence, which some people said it was too dark, I didn't get that. But I felt like the way that he shoots it, you know, when you have the dead soldiers coming up on the under the ground, and Sinon coming in, who I thought they did a fantastic job, who everyone crapped on because they thought it was Achilles, which who cares if it, you know, if
people have the
Elliot
right
Page
to be wrong, but that doesn't mean we need to call that criticism. Like that.
Yeah, exactly. 100%.
All the Elliot Page stuff, like learn your facts.
Yeah, and to that point, I know I don't want to switch gears right now, but I felt like Elliot Page was fantastic in the role of Sinon. I thought they did an incredible job and proved why they're such a great actor. And so I had no issues there. But with these kind of shots, it just felt like you could feel like the tension of what is happening in the movie. So I tend to agree with Zach usually, but with the IMAX cameras, I have to agree with you that I don't think this movie could have been shot in any other way.
No,
and now that it has been, it's going to be hard for any other movie to live up to this bar that has been set of how to use IMAX cameras, which she's already done before, even in the sequences with Dark Knight, which are some of the best sequences you've seen in any superhero movie. She's already done it, but to use it in this way, in such a consistent way, the whole entire movie, I don't see any other director, maybe, you know, Denis Villeneuve, whatever he does after James Bond. I don't see anyone else that can use the IMAX cameras to fully make an audience feel like they are a part of the movie. And I thought that was extremely special.
Yeah. So what we're seeing here is Nolan's visualization of Hades, right? And like, spoiler alert, Hades is supposed to be dark and there's supposed to be a lot of fire. And rather than putting us in some subterranean CG world, he allowed it to exist in a way that we could identify with it. And actually the amount of natural light that they were allowing into the aperture in this scene was just enough so that we could make a difference between this character and that. And it actually reminded me a lot of the movie The Revenant, which was shot completely using natural light and or fire. And as we look at, you know, things screen right here, that's exactly what we're getting. And really one of the most interesting and important monologues that happens within the film comes from Tiresias when he delivers his prophecy, and he drinks the blood, he delivers the prophecy, and sure enough, everything that he warned Odysseus about came true. And it came true being only able to see James Raymore, who played Tiresias, only being able to see him really from the nose down. And I found it really compelling. So the people who said, well, this scene was too dark, hey friends, we were in hell. It's dark there. And so like, okay, again, you know, check your facts before we criticize. This is not a perfect movie. I have no problem with the scene. And I actually found it to be one of the film's highlights.
Yeah, I did too. I really felt like you needed this scene, especially with Sinon. I hope I'm pronouncing it right, to really push Odysseus's story to the end.
Sinon is a sacrifice.
It is. It is. And Sinon
was the epitome of loyalty.
and the epitome of his guilt, right?
Yes.
Also he's so loyal to his own men, even though he knew that by doing this is ultimately going to sell out my soldier and cause their death.
Yep.
Someone that volunteered to take the place of someone else to be there and fight with him and grow over 10 years into a man who will die for Odysseus's cause.
And you know who you
beautiful
need
is
to
that?
play someone like Sinan's character, who's going to go through this complete arc, who's going to get drugged completely through hell, pun intended, and back, is someone who is a human being who have themselves been drugged through hell and back. So it makes the casting of Elliot Page that much more important, that much more of a good choice, and it makes the performance that much more meaningful. Look, people think about these things. They're not just throwing out invitations, right? I wasn't in the movie. So there's a reason why these gifted people, given their life experiences, become perfect for roles. That's why Elliot Page was perfect for this role.
I totally agree. I was captivated by their performance, and I don't, once you see these movies, it's kind of a movie on this scale that is so detailed. Everything that we see is because Christopher Nolan and company designed it to be that way.
Yep.
And the fact that he knew Elliot Page would be perfect to sell these points, the points that make Odysseus who he is, that help him get through his journey, because he needs to understand the ramifications of what he did and that he is not the saint that he believes himself to be. You needed someone, like you said, that's gone through their own personal journey and that can reflect that on screen. And I really think you're right. I don't think anyone else but Elliot Page could play this. If they get nominated, I would not be surprised. It might be a little bit smaller of a role, but for how small of a role it was, I think it was the most impactful. Maybe on the scale of John Leguizamo's impactfulness of the movie itself. I think those two are probably the unsung heroes of the entire film.
Yeah, they become like the emotional register, or like the emotional lens through which Odysseus must view himself. Right. And I think Leguizamo and Page are both in the same spot here, where there probably wasn't quite enough food on the plate for a nomination. But it's kind of like maybe not Hall of Fame, but Hall of Very Good for both of them. And I think career heights for both of them. I think it was Alfred Hitchcock who said the audience gets to see only what they need to see. And this Hades scene, and in particular the screenshot that you're providing, is a great case of an auteur director providing us just enough visual information to drive the story without overexposing us to unnecessary information. And so, credit for him for showing some restraint. I was livid watching Tenet because I didn't feel like he showed any restraint. And now I'm eating my words because this is far more measured and controlled. And I just can't tell you how much I appreciated it.
I feel the exact same way. I felt it with Tenet. I need to do another rewatch to fully. But yeah, when I saw it, we didn't get to see it in the theaters. I think that makes a big difference.
You're right. You're right about that.
I think, Christopher Nolan's movies are designed for the theater, and that's what hurt him and fractured the relationship between him and WB so bad that he was like, see you guys, like, you don't know me. Clearly, it's like a bad relationship. Like, clearly you don't know me if you think this is the right move to put my movie on streaming. I would have held that one back and be like, we'll do the other ones, but let's hold Christopher's back so we can keep that relationship. But yeah, no, I think another aspect of this movie, it has to be the sound of the Odyssey. And we can't talk about the sound of Odyssey without talking about the multiple Oscar nominated Ludwig Göransson, who just turns in another masterclass. We are seeing the makings of a new John Williams, Hans Zimmer level score maker that is just beyond his years. I don't understand like how someone can be this good. Am I hyping it up too much, Adam? Am I hyping him up too much? I know those are,
I mean,
those
the
are
names
big
that you
shoes.
just mentioned, you know,
Those
that
are
would
big
be like,
shoes.
yeah, those are huge shoes. And you know, for people who are sports fans to hear, you know, this rookie is the next Mickey Mantle, like those things happen. And you just mentioned two people that probably would fall into that category. I think the most exciting thing that we've seen and in particular heard from Göransson is the willingness to diversify whatever it is that the film requires. And, you know, John Williams had a very classical way of building score. And it is probably, even without argument now, the greatest that film score has ever been utilized on screen. But Göransson is, especially with this film, has been forced to empty the tool bag out and grab all different tools because he was only permitted to use instruments, including the human voice, that would have existed 3,000 years ago, which is why you get so many gongs, which is why you get so many stringed instruments, which is why you get voice. But there was nothing, you know, you don't hear a harpsichord, which wouldn't come around until thousands of years later. You don't get to hear a full orchestra because that did not exist. And so I think just like Nolan really upped his level of difficulty, so did Göransson. And so he's like, oh, you want me to bat left-handed? Okay, I'll do it, and I'll still knock it out of the park. I think this is the best score that I've heard so far this year, yet again. And we keep saying that about Göransson. He just did it completely differently for Sinners last year, and it was outstanding. So yeah, this is a very special craftsperson who is probably approaching the apex of their career.
I'll put it in better terms. I mentioned Michael Jordan and LeBron.
Yeah.
And I think we're seeing the Steph Curry of musical scores today. Someone who is ultimately changing the game when it comes to scores of movies and pushing it forward to a new generation of people. Which
I think that's a very apt comparison. The way that Curry changed the sport of basketball and the way strategically that people played. I think Göransson is doing the same thing in terms of the way that people think about the function of not only executing a score, writing a score, but also the way that it will play to an audience. And so, yeah, I think that's an apt comparison.
And I think that's why Ludwig and Christopher Nolan make such a great duo. You know, I don't know how you score The Odyssey without making it sound either overly historical or like every other modern blockbuster. But I think Ludwig found this incredible middle ground. The music somehow feels timeless with the aforementioned tools that he was able to use of the time, while still giving the movie that massive propulsive energy that you expect from a Nolan film. So for me, the score helped bridge those two worlds in such a beautiful way that it feels like just such a natural part of the movie. Like, oh, this makes sense. But then also, oh, this surprised me. And you know, in the third act, oh, we're in a Nolan action movie. This feels like Dark Knight a little bit, you know. And so it's like, it didn't just stay with one style. He adapted to every part of what the story demanded, that emotional feeling that the audience should get from it. And that is such a masterful stroke in scoring a film.
Yeah, he allowed it to build to crescendo when necessary. And, you know, score will always be like kind of the emotional touch point for audiences. The music tells you when you're supposed to feel a certain way, and he certainly was able to accomplish that again.
Can I ask you, you know, I wanted to talk about the quieter moments, because there was a moment in this movie that really touched my heart, and it wasn't on the big spectacle of the journey that Odysseus went on, but it was a great reminder of where Odysseus started and where he ended in the story. And I think that was the beautiful emotional connection he had to his dog Argos.
Oof.
And for all the massive spectacle in this movie, that moment with him really hit me the hardest. And it was probably one of the most simplest, because it's just Odysseus coming home and seeing his dog. You know, Odysseus has been gone for 20 years. Argos is now this incredibly old dog, literally on his last leg.
Yeah.
And when he finally sees Odysseus, you can see him recognizing his master and trying to wag his tail. He's almost too old to even do it. And then he finally passes away after seeing his master one last time, almost like he's been holding on long enough to know that Odysseus made it home. And I don't know about you, but for me, that was just so beautiful. And in a movie that's enamored with monsters and death and witches and all these things, something at its emotional core is just a relationship of a man with his dog. That was so beautiful to me. Did that resonate with you, Adam?
It did, and I think pet lovers and pet owners will probably connect with that on a very high level. To me, I found it as an echo of one of the film's central themes, because it's the question of how do we treat our neighbor, and in particular, how do we treat those who cannot take care of themselves? And again, it goes back to the repeated phrase of Zeus's law. But the fact that the dog was put out literally onto a pile of poop, of excrement, to lay there for his dying days, to me, it epitomized everything that all of those suitors who we hated so much, and in particular Antinous, Robert Pattinson's Antinous, he's the one who mistreats this dog who could no longer take care of itself. Is that the way that we're going to treat each other as a society? Because if the answer is yes, we're headed for a downfall. And I think that that's something that the film takes very seriously. And you're right. I do think that his dog waited long enough to see Odysseus's return as a means of comfort, and not just like, okay, good, I'm glad he made it home, because Odysseus's return represents more than just daddy's home. It represents this direction, this downward spiral that Ithaca was heading into. We're going to be okay, because he's back to figuratively and literally right the ship, right? And so I do think that that was a resonant moment, but I viewed it more as just a thematic echo rather than a standalone moment.
I totally agree. I really felt how powerful that moment is. And I think you're right in that there's so many layers to the symbolism of man and his dog in this movie. And I thought it was absolutely incredible how the script dealt with this in such a powerful way, because it's really so simple. We're probably going to wrap up here pretty soon. I wanted to ask you, what didn't completely work for you? Like I mentioned earlier, the American accents occasionally took me out of the ancient setting, particularly early on. And I think some of the choices Nolan makes to modernize the material, make it accessible, absolutely help the movie. But occasionally I wonder if it sacrificed some of that mythic quality in the process. And then there's just the density of it all. So there are moments I wanted the movie to breathe a little bit or be a little bit more mythical in the story it's telling. What didn't work for you ultimately?
I'll start kind of on the macro level. I thought the presentation of the story was a little bit fragmentary in my perspective, but so is the Odyssey, right?
Right.
But if I'm not judging it against the weight of its epic source material, and I'm just looking at it as a film, which is something that I do, I've got charted 11 different key scenes, from Ithaca, the Cyclops cave. We haven't talked much about the goddess Circe, who turned the men into pigs. 11 different places. And I do at times think that we jumped from point A to point B to point C a little bit quickly, but always use the nonlinear editing to kind of link the story back to its origin, which is what was going on in Troy, what was going on in Ithaca. And so I think that was very wisely done. I think there were moments that we might have got 5 minutes when it might have taken 10. But how long did we want this movie to be? So I know sacrifices needed to be made. So that was one of the things where I bumped a little bit. I got over the accent work pretty quickly. The only other thing that I struggled with a little bit, it was nobody's fault in terms of performance, is that when you have this many actors and you have this many various locations and scenes, there's just not enough on the plate for some really good actors. And like, Robert Pattinson came across a touch static for me. He wanted one thing. It was clear why he wanted that one thing. He did everything he could to accomplish that one thing. And it was all like in one room. So like I wanted more. He's a very good actor. And I think I would have liked to see more from his character. Same with Zendaya, same with Charlize. Like these were not big parts. And I wish there could have been a little bit more room for depth out of some of them. But I mean, these are nitpick complaints because I really do feel like this is a very successful movie. Like I said, one of the very few hyped movies that actually lives up to the hype.
Yeah. I agree with all those sentiments. These are obviously just nitpicks and something that is probably one of the greatest feats in filmmaking that we've seen in a very, very long time.
Yeah, very long time.
So, and something that stood out to me that I thought really tied everything together was the third act. And, after spending the entire movie watching Odysseus desperately trying to get home, there's something incredibly satisfying and brutal about finally seeing what happens when he actually gets there. And I loved this section of the story, in the return with Ralph Fiennes, which just focuses on this third act as its whole movie. But seeing Nolan tackle it through his own blockbuster language was completely different, because it was the payoff of everything that we saw that he went through. And I think when you know the stakes and you know the journey, it makes it all that much sweeter once we get to that third act, which, as we've seen, can be its own movie because it's such a epic part in itself. And there's something about the tension, the escalating violence, the way Nolan builds momentum. I even got shades of The Dark Knight in the way that it controlled the chaos starting to unfold. I even leaned over to my buddy in the movie and was like, this is reminding me of like his Dark Knight a little bit. For me, that entire third act was almost a movie within the movie. And I thought the way
dare we say Inception,
he incepted us in the movie. That the way that he used the third act to close this final chapter, I thought was a really brilliant stroke and really landed the plane well. What did you think about the third act of the movie?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. I loved the third act. I've been critical of some of his third acts historically. I think he gets it right with this one. All of the action set piece I thought played very well. I thought it gave an opportunity for his son, Telemachus, to atone for some of his physical shortcomings earlier in the film that had been kind of set forth. And what I even liked more was the counterbalance of the perception. And again, we're in full spoiler territory here. The thought that we're going to lose Odysseus and the victory of his quest was his return home, only to realize that his victory was his ability to honor his fallen soldiers by eventually sailing west and giving them the proper respect they deserve and having Penelope at his side. And I walked out of the theater, 6 inches off of the ground, because in a movie that's about the mistreatment of one another, it ended with a note of optimism. And I did not expect that. And yes, I've read The Odyssey, but I didn't expect Nolan to play it that way. So I was very happy that he took some liberties with the actual poem and he gave us a little dose of like, no, maybe we're going to be all right.
Yeah, I got the same feeling. I really thought he was able to land this plane in a really special way, in a
Yeah.
really non-Nolan way. A lot of
Yeah.
times it's a little nebulous the way the character ends, or it keeps you having questions after. And I thought this was a very definitive, happy ending,
Agreed.
and the right ending for the story that he told. So now the big question is, I think this movie is also, going to create a very interesting conversation about Christopher Nolan's career,
Mhm.
because at this point, what exactly is left for this guy to prove? Like, what do you want to see Nolan do next?
I don't necessarily feel like he has to prove anything. The thing that I want him to
Definitely
do,
not.
the thing that I want him to do is I want him to continue to take the same level of care and the same level of pride in the practicality of filmmaking. It took him a long, I think this was a 6-month shoot. That's a really long and really expensive. And he's earned the right to continue to tell the stories that he wants to tell. I think there's genres out there that he hasn't touched on. I don't need to see a Christopher Nolan rom-com, with all respect to that genre. But I do think that he would benefit from not continuing to try to get bigger and bigger, because eventually he's going to leave Earth.
Mhm.
I think there is grandeur in size of scope, but then there's also grandeur in the contemplation of certain ideas. And I know he did that with Memento. I know he explored that on grand scale within Inception. So maybe thinking a little bit smaller, but then finding room within those smaller ideas. I don't want to suggest to him to do anything, because I've been so delightfully surprised by
Yeah.
the choices that he's been making. And I just feel lucky that, like, here we are alive at a time when he's making movies, and one day somebody's going to say, hey, were you around when this guy did this? The same way that we think back on like John Ford or some of the greats of the past. It's cool to be a part of it.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I like Zach's, opinion, like an epic horror film, a time spanning romance, give us variety in genre. And
I'm here for it.
I think that's what he's come to be known as, is someone that takes things that we think we knows and puts and presents it in a way that we never considered was a possibility. And so I'm just super excited to see what he does next. I would love, I would love a Seven type of movie. I think that'd be really cool.
Okay.
Just see a Christopher Nolan type of movie. I know he kind of played with it a little bit with, Robin Williams and Pacino, but I feel like I feel like there's something now that he has this. It is smaller, like you were saying. It is a smaller film, but I would love to see what he makes after everything that he's learned thus far. I think that would be really cool. But
He's just so much better at it now than he was when he made Insomnia. And I think anybody who does any career, whether you're a writer or whatever it is that you do, he made Insomnia 24 years ago. Like, he's a quarter of a century better at doing this. Right.
That's crazy.
Yeah, I would love to see him return to a thriller. So, he's people say, he doesn't make that many movies. And when I looked back over his filmography, he's averaged a movie every 2.5 years, including COVID. So every 2.5, maybe 3 years at the most, he's been producing, starting in 98, ending in 26. And so he's actually been one of our more consistent filmmakers, and even shockingly so.
I totally agree. As we end this, where do you think The Odyssey ranks on your Nolan movies?
I need to see it again to be really fair to myself and to a list. It's certainly in my top 5 and closer to the top than the bottom of the top 5. I have some of his movies that just didn't really work for me, but I put it in the realm of The Dark Knight, Memento, The Odyssey, Interstellar. I think it's in conversation with the best work he's ever done. Is it the very best? I think time can tell. I think repeat viewings can tell. Movies have a funny way of feeling permanent when you first see them, and then you see more movies, and then you don't think about them anymore. So I want to give some time, but it is certainly closer to the top of his filmography for me than the bottom. This is an excellent film, and one that if people haven't seen it yet, or maybe if they prematurely judged it because of what they saw on Twitter or whatever, hey, give it a try. And maybe it's not for you, but it is a wonderful piece of filmmaking.
I totally agree. I think I have the same sentiments. I don't know where it lands in my top 5. I just know it's in there and I need to watch it again. Might try to get to the movie theater again. I mean, I am seeing Spider-Man on Thursday. No, 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
Okay.
2 weeks from last Thursday, but I'm like,
and I'll be seeing it on Monday with my son. So we're very excited about that.
Oh, this Monday? Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah,
that's
they're
awesome.
giving us the early screening. So we're both in for that one.
That's fantastic. Yeah. So I really want to try and see it again on the big screen is my hope. We'll see if I have time, but yeah, I would say it has to be in my top 5. I just don't know where. But Adam, seriously, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such a great conversation. Like, I love getting to know more about you, and we could be talking for hours. Like your journey, through film, through a critical lens, still the passion, and then actually sitting down with you with the Odyssey and breaking it down with you. I think having your perspective as a professional brought something really special to this review. Before we get out of here, where can the good people find you, my friend?
Well, thanks for asking. Thank you so much for having me on. The invite meant everything to me. I was really excited to talk about this film. Obviously, you gave me a little room to talk about moviearcher.com, which I really appreciate. It's very simple. Moviearcher.com, all the social media platforms at Movie Archer. In addition to that, Movie Archer Podcast Network. I've got 3 shows to push to the audience here. Revisionist Almanac, Movies and Us, and TV and Us, and possibly another one coming soon. So we'll say and stay posted on that. But again, I really appreciate the invite. This has been a lot of fun. Don't lose my number. I'd love to do this again sometime.
Awesome. And we would definitely love to have you back. And, this was such a great movie for us to start our movie journey together with. And I think it's just so fascinating, the conversation in general about this kind of movie. For good or bad, people are talking about movies, most of them for the right reasons. And I think that is very special. And that is why we go to the movie theaters. We go to the movie theaters to have these conversations. And these conversations don't mean that you need to agree. You actually have great conversations when you don't agree. But as long as you keep it respectful, that's how you have these great conversations about the things that we love. So I got to thank everyone in the chat for being here. I got to thank Zach again for giving his take. And check me out on the Evan Edition. I'm on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, all the stuff, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of it. And be here for the respectful conversations. It doesn't mean you have to agree. We all have passions for the things that we love, and that's how you get the best conversation. So Adam, thank you again so much for being here. Stay on for a second just so I can thank you again off air. Thank you everyone for watching, being part of the conversation. Go see a movie in theaters. What a great summer to see movies. Go watch House of the Dragon right now. I know I'm going to force my wife to sit with me to do that in a few minutes. And we will see you guys next time. All right, my friends, take care.
It's the Evan Edition. The Evan Edition. The Evan Edition. The Evan Edition. It's the Evan Edition. The Evan Edition. The Evan Edition. The Evan Edition. It's the Evan Edition.